All right, in this video we're going to be talking about 6.3c, which is to represent integer operations with concrete models and connect the actions with models to standardized algorithms. So basically solving integer operations. And 6.3d, add, subtract, multiply, and divide integers fluently. So to be able to do that fluently, it just means to be able to do it well. The problems we pick from are from Release Start questions. So the first one is 6.3c. Which expression is represented on the number line? Okay, so the first thing you need to notice is it starts at 0, okay? And then, where do I end up at? I end up at -8. So obviously, whatever I pick, my F, G, H, or J, it needs to give me an answer of -8. So let's first look at all of these and see which ones give us -8. So F is 0 minus -8, and of course, as you know, that means subtract, but also means the opposite. It means the opposite of addition. If I started off on F, 0 minus -8, this right here would mean the opposite of addition, which is subtraction. If I have another sign, I was at the opposite of subtraction, or the subtraction. So the opposite of subtraction is addition. So this would be 0 plus 8, which would give me +8. Well, +8 and -8, they are opposite. They are not the same thing, so it couldn't be F. All right, let's see if it's G. -2 times 4, integer operation. So a -2 times 4, I have 4 groups. I got 1 plus -2. Another way of doing this would be written like this. So when I have 4 groups of -2, I counted up how many -2s I have. I have 8 of them. They're negative, so my answer would be -8. Or if I followed the algorithm, -2 times 4. 2 times 4 is 8, and a negative times a positive is negative. So again, my answer is -8. So that gives me -8, so it could be G, so I'm going to underline that. I'll erase this. What about the next one? -2 plus -8. Now, -2 plus -8. Now, -2, 2 is negative because that's a negative sign in front of it. 8 is negative, has a negative sign in front of it. If they are both negative, you add them up, and your answer is negative. Why is that? Well, what if they were both positive? Again, you would add them up, and your answer would be +10. If they're both negative, you add them up, and your answer is -10. So that can't be H. What about J? So I'm going to erase this. So let's look at J. -2 divided by 4, and I'm going to write it like this because a fraction bar is the same thing as a division bar. First of all, a negative divided by a positive is a negative, and then 2 divided by 4 is 0.5, 5/10, or we can keep it as a fraction, -1/2 and -1/2. Obviously, it's not the same thing as -8. So our only answer here was G. Why is it G? Because notice I have 4 groups of -2. 4 groups of -2, so the answer is G, isn't great. On the 2015 test, we had a similar question. Which expression is represented on the number line? So notice again, we start off at 0. We end up at -12, and we're going to use what we learned in the last one. So notice I have -4, but I have 3 groups of it. I have -4, and I have 3 groups of it. Whatever I do, my answer has to be -12. And so my answer is D. Why? Because I have 3 groups. I know it's going to the left, but I have 3 groups. Groupings can't be positive or negative. They're just groupings, okay? 3 groups of -4s, so it's -12. It can't be this one. A, -12 divided by -3 is +4. Well, that doesn't make sense. Can't be A. B, 0 minus -12. Remember, this sign is the opposite. The opposite of addition is subtraction. You add one more. The opposite of subtraction is addition. So this is 0 plus 12, which is 12. And 12 is not the same thing. That's -12. On C, Negative 3 times negative 4, a negative times a negative is a positive, so it would be positive 12. So it can't be C, because 12 and negative 12 aren't the same thing. And the answer is D. Now we're going to go to 6.3D, add, subtract, multiply, and divide integers fluently. So, Serena bought 5 shirts for $6 each and spent $7 on lunch. She paid for the shirts and lunch using her debit card. The change in the balance of Serena's checking account can be represented by the expression shown. Which integer represents the change in the balance of Serena's checking account from these purchases? Now this is a order of operations problem because we have multiple things we're doing here. So parentheses first, don't have parentheses, cross that out. Exponents, no exponents. Then I'm going to multiply and divide. Well, I only have multiply, but I'm going to do that first. If I have a number next to another number in parentheses, that means I'm going to multiply. So 5 times negative 6 is negative 30. Why? Well, 5 times 6 is 30, and a negative times a positive, or a positive times a negative, is a negative. Then what am I left with? Well, I've taken care of the multiplication division. What am I left with? Plus negative 7. Now notice the 30 is negative, so is the 7, because I have a negative sign in front of it. Now I could use number lines, I could use counters. 30 would go to the left, 7 would go to the left. Or if I use counters, none of them would cancel out because they're all negative. And so ultimately I'm going to get negative 37. Why again? Well, I spent $30, then I spent $7 more. That means I spent a total of $37. And my balance is going down because I'm taking money away because I'm buying goods. So again, if they're both negative, you add them up and your answer is negative. So my answer was A, negative $37. From the 2018 test, Luann is playing a math game. She chooses 3 cards. The value of her cards is shown. What is the sum? And the sum means the answer to an addition problem, so that means I'm going to add all these up. So, we have negative 12 plus 3 plus negative 5. So I'm going to start from left to right, order of operations. Negative 12 plus 3, well, if I used a number line, we'll draw a number line right here. 0, and we'll put negative 12 right here. So obviously I'm going to the right on 3. So I'm going to the right on 3. That's going to get me to negative 9. If I take care of these, gets me to negative 9. Why? Because negative 12 is negative, 3 is positive. What do you do if 1 is negative and 1 is positive? We subtract the number with the greater absolute value, 12, negative 12. The absolute value would be 12. 12 minus 3 would be 9. And then you have to determine whether it's going to be positive or negative. How? Well, the number with the greater absolute value, 12, is negative, therefore my answer is negative. Another way of thinking of this is money. If I owed you $12, but I had 3, I could pay you the $3, but I still owe you $9. Then we're left with plus negative 5. From previous problems, we realized 9 is negative. I have a negative sign in front of it. 5 is negative because I have a negative sign in front of it. I'm adding a negative number, which is kind of like just taking away. So if they're both negative, you add them up. 9 plus 5 is 14. They are both negative, so your answer is negative. Again, you can think of you owe someone $9 and you borrow. You're adding more debt to yourself. You borrow $5. So how much do you owe them now? $14. So the answer to this is negative 14. All right. From the 2017 6.3D, which expression has a value of negative 22? Now these, you can see you're going to have to do several things to prove which one has a value of negative 22. On these, I'm going to write PEMDAS way over here, because again, just to remind me what order I need to do things. Okay, now that I'm going to have parentheses, I know I have parentheses here, but that's a multiplication symbol. No exponents, so it's multiply, divide, add, and subtract. So let's start with A. So the first thing I'm going to do is divide, because this is minus a negative, so either you're subtracting a negative or you're ultimately adding, but division first, according to the rules of PEMDAS. 33 divided by negative Negative 3 is negative 11. A positive divided by a negative. It's a negative. 33 divided by 3 is 11, so it's negative 11. And then I have 8 minus negative 3 minus 11. So I have to ask, what is 8 minus negative 3? Again, the one line means to opposite. The opposite of addition is subtraction. One more sign, the opposite of subtraction is addition. So it's 8 plus 3. And what is 8 plus 3? It is 11. What am I left with? 11 minus 11. It's somewhere around 0, which is not negative 22. So it can't be A. Let's look at B. Now, all I have here is addition or subtraction. And on a problem like that, I can just go from left to right. So let's begin. Negative 3 plus negative 2. They're both negative. So what do you do if they're both negative? You add them up. And your answer is negative. So that's negative 5. Minus negative 8. Look, 2 lines. That means opposite, opposite. So opposite of addition, subtraction. Opposite of subtraction is addition. So negative 5 plus 8 is 3. Why is that 3? Because if one number is positive, one number is negative, you subtract. You take the subtract the number with a greater absolute value by the number with a lesser absolute value. And then how do you determine if it's positive or negative? The 8 was positive. Why? Because it had 2 lines in front of it. Opposite and opposite. So it's positive 3. And then what I'm left with is 3 minus 1 is 2, which is definitely not negative 22. It can't be B. All right. So let's look at C. So I have multiplication and subtracting a negative number. So I'm going to do multiplication first. 6 times 2 is negative 12. And then I'm subtracting, which means I'm multiplying adding. Again, opposite and opposite. Negative 12 plus 15 is positive 3. Why is it positive 3? Again, the absolute value, but again, you can think of money. If I had $15 but I owed you 12, I could pay you the $12 and still have 3 left over. So it's not C. So let's look at D. So I have multiplication and subtraction. What's negative 5 times 2? Well, 5 times 2 is 10. And a negative times a positive is negative, so it's negative 10. Go on here, sorry. And then I'm going to subtract 12. Well, if they're both negative, what do? You add them up, and your answer is negative 10 plus 12 is 22. And since they're both negative, your answer is negative 22. So that is our answer. The answer is D. Well, these have been a few problems on 6.3C and 6.3D. Hopefully this has helped you. If you have any additional questions or concerns, you can email me at jhewlett@leisd.ws. Thanks, and make it a great day.